there, and welcome into another very important edition of the JayMac podcast. We want to answer the question, will face masks, I'm talking about eye coverings or goggles, will those be required next, or at least recommended? We'll answer that question. And also, I don't know if you caught the briefing from the state of Utah with the governor, but they answered a lot of important questions. They kind of went over all of the myths or the misconceptions that are out there or the things that you see on social media, and they ticked them off and they answered them one by one, and I want to share those with you because there are so many outright lies, falsities, or falsehoods. Is that what we'd call them? Misinformation, all because of politics and people picking sides, and it's just madness out there. So I want to share all of the great information that came out of that press conference today in case you missed it. Also, a reminder that I'm looking for people to help me be able to continue to bring daily podcasts to you on a full-time basis. You can do that by becoming a patron. Just donate $1 a month, $2 a month, $5 a month, $10 a month, whatever you can. Just click on the link in the description of this podcast and help us out. I also want to start recording these podcasts in video form. I'm getting set up for that. I don't know why anyone would want to actually see me or my face giving these podcasts. I've always been in radio for a reason, but I am working on that as well behind the scenes, so that gives you a little bit of an update. All right, so before we dive into whether or not you might be required to wear eye coverings or goggles or whatever else, I want to take you to this briefing that happened in Utah, because the governor decided, and you could hear it in his voice, he was so frustrated with the misinformation that is out there that he really just wanted to go through one by one and answer people's questions. Now, you can decide if this is some grand conspiracy and the governor and the state medical officials and the health department and the epidemiologists, they're all in it, just like every same group of people of every single state in the union. They're all in the conspiracy, and every single government leader across the globe and every single medical official across the globe is also involved in the conspiracy. You can believe that if you want. I, for one, am going to listen to the medical officials. I have absolutely no reason to question what we're being told here. Now, one of the problems is that a lot of people have said, well, the information keeps changing, or it's different now. We didn't have to wear a mask before, and now we are wearing a mask, and that tells you that they have ulterior motives or that they don't really know what they're talking about. Well, look, admittedly, this is a brand new illness. It's been around basically since December, so the information is going to change. But there is verifiable proof about certain things out there, and that information can be used to save lives. So let's focus in on those issues and ask ourselves, is there something that we can do? Is there something that you can do today that might potentially save somebody's life? I think that should be the thing that is paramount on everybody's mind. And even if you end up doing something that actually doesn't save any lives and we later find out, oh, that really wasn't a thing, were you really that inconvenienced? Were you really that put out? Did your life really have to change that much or that dramatically? I just don't understand why we're not willing to err on the side of caution here. So basically what the governor did is he asked questions and then allowed them to be answered by the experts. And so he basically asked them the way that you might see them on social media or on the internet. So I'm not going to play his questions. I'll tell you what his questions were. I am going to play for you the answers. Okay. So the first question, and we've dealt with this here on this podcast already, but this is a more specific answer, so I wanted to share it with you. Question number 1, is the flu the same as COVID-19? We keep hearing these claims. It's just as contagious, or the flu is more contagious, or the flu is more deadly. What is the answer here?
In regards to COVID-19, so the question, Dr. Dunn, is what is the difference or the similarities between our traditional flu, and we have a flu season coming up, and the COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, so we know that COVID-19 is certainly more infectious and more deadly than the annual flu. Already to date, we've had twice as many hospitalizations and 5 times as many deaths due to COVID-19 compared to last year's flu season. There's also some key differences, right? Flu, we have a vaccine and we have known treatment with antivirals, and we don't have that information yet for COVID-19. There's just so much we don't know about the virus that causes COVID-19 that makes it more dangerous and unpredictable moving forward.
How many times have you heard me say there's just so much that we don't know? How many times? And we're going to continue to hear that over and over again. Okay, so the next question, well, how much more deadly is COVID-19 than the flu?
Yeah, so because COVID-19 is something, we just identified in December of 2019, it's going to take the scientific community time to understand exactly how much more deadly it is than flu, because it's only been around for a few months. And so as this pandemic evolves and we get more information, we'll be able to more accurately say how deadly COVID-19 is. I think something to anchor to, though, is knowing that already in 5 months of COVID-19 in Utah, we've had 5 times as many deaths due to COVID-19 compared to flu season last year, which is an 8-month season. So it has already claimed more lives than flu.
5 times as many deaths as the flu season last year. And we are still, once again, my friends, trying to figure out this illness and this disease. And we don't know the long-term impact that it will have on people's lives. Now, so the governor then wanted to go after another claim that he has heard out there, and that is that medical officials are counting anything as a COVID death. A guy has COVID-19 and he gets in a motorcycle accident, and we call that a COVID death. And so he really wanted to get down to brass tacks about who is counted as a COVID death and who is not.
So we at the health department are notified of every individual who has COVID-19 and then passes away. We work with the clinicians and our medical examiner to determine the cause of death. So just because someone has COVID-19 when they pass away does not mean that they will be counted as a death due to COVID-19. We actually investigate those cases to make sure that the cause of death is related to COVID-19, so that if that individual had not had COVID-19, they would not have passed away. So all of our deaths are specifically due to COVID-19, and I'm very confident that we're capturing the deaths accurately.
Hey, you can believe her or not. You can believe the conspiracies or not. She says she's very confident that all of the reported deaths that they've seen in Utah are caused by COVID-19. Now, you can believe that, no, we're inflating the numbers because they get paid more if it's a COVID death, or they're inflating the numbers because they don't want Trump to be reelected as president, if that somehow makes sense. But there she is explaining the process and exactly what they do when there is a death, because they want accuracy in the numbers when it comes to tracking COVID-19 deaths. Again, you decide however you want. But I really appreciated that today they kind of went through each one of these issues and they answered them specifically. Then they brought up a Dr. Abbott from BYU. to talk about this mask study that BYU did. Now, I shared some of this study with you in a previous podcast, but some of the information jumped out to me as well, so I wanted to share it with you. And first of all, he talks about what they looked at because they really wanted to know, do masks work or don't they?
This research that I'm presenting today is based on over 130 scientific studies associated with COVID-19 and the effectiveness of masks.
And he went on to say that they did this because they saw all of the controversy. They saw this being politicized. And they're like, we got to get to the bottom of this. We need to know for ourselves. And to answer the question that a lot of conspiracy theorists will ask, well, who paid for this study? Which organization funded this research? Because that will tell you the truth about whether or not you can believe this information or not.
We didn't receive any funding to do this work, nor do we plan on pursuing funding. This was a review that we did because we were concerned citizens and people with scientific training. We felt a responsibility to address the widespread confusion and sometimes misinformation that we saw circulating online and among our family and friends.
So, sorry, no money trail to blame for the results that they came up with. And he did address the fact that when COVID-19 first came out, people were saying, officials, even Dr. Fauci type people, were saying that you don't need to wear a mask, it won't help. He talks about why that happens.
As the governor mentioned, initially we knew very little about this disease, and the recommendations that came out of the CDC and the World Health Organization were based on old research on other outbreaks. So based on that previous research, they recommended that masks would not be effective, public masking would not be effective.
So then he talks about how new research changed all that, and that's how the scientific method works. You start out with the knowledge that you have, then you do the research and you update and you make changes. I've had people contact me via social media and they're like, you can't believe anything Dr. Fauci says because he was wrong about this and wrong about that. Well, first of all, if that's how we're going to judge somebody's credibility, if I use that same standard against our current president, well, okay, you know where I'm going with that. But that's not the way that science works. Science is always evolving. We're always learning. We're always adding to our knowledge if we're doing it right. And so the fact that somebody comes out with new and additional information or reverses themselves on something that was said, that's not a sign of not being professional or not being accurate. That's a sign of the scientific method progressing forward. Now, here's some of the most important information that came out of this for me that I found to be very fascinating. And he talked about the rate of spread and the rate of mortality when masks are worn.
So this fundamental question, are masks effective at preventing COVID-19? It is now abundantly clear that masks are an essential tool at slowing the spread of COVID-19. One of the first clues that masks were effective came from the difference in the rate of spread and the mortality among different countries.
All right, so you have these countries who adopted masks sooner. You actually have countries who have a culture of wearing a mask when there's a problem. So they looked at those countries first, and they found that the rate of spread was slower and that the rate of death, the mortality rate, was lower as well. And then he points out something that I find to be very interesting.
When masks are used, the disease is actually less deadly, even if you catch it.
So if you're wearing a mask and you catch COVID-19, it's less deadly for you. Now, how does that make sense? He goes on to explain that perhaps because you don't take in so much of the the chemicals or whatever you want to call them, so many of the particles, that you don't get as sick. And this is some of the first information we've always talked about. Well, the reason that we're wearing a mask is to save other people around us. But this is suggesting that wearing a mask can help you as well. That if you have a mask on and you do catch it, that you're less likely to have major symptoms and less likely to die. So this is some good information that wearing a mask isn't just about other people. It's also about you as well. And then he goes on to talk about why wearing a mask with COVID-19 is so much more important than other illnesses that we've seen. That why it's such a, like I hear people say, oh, we don't wear a mask for the flu. We don't wear a mask for this, or we don't wear a mask for that. He describes, again, this is Dr. Abbott at BYU, why it is that specifically with COVID-19, wearing a mask is so critically important.
The second reason, which in my opinion is more important, is the rate of asymptomatic spread of this disease. So it's estimated that 50% or more of the new cases of COVID-19 are spread by people who are showing no symptoms. So I could be feeling completely healthy, and yet I still have the virus reproducing in my system. I could spread it to my loved ones, my neighbors, and strangers that I meet. So that's why preventatively wearing a mask appears to be so effective at combating this disease.
That's why wearing a mask can be so effective against combating the spread of this disease. You think about it. Somebody gets the flu, they immediately start feeling symptomatic, and what do? They call in sick from work, they sequester in their bedrooms, they don't go out to parties, they don't go places to eat, they get in bed and they start, consuming liquids, and they start fighting the illness because they feel terrible. Well, then you've got all of these people who are asymptomatic, and they're wandering around doing and living their life as normal, having no idea that they're spreading this disease all over the place. That's why wearing a mask is so important. He also dealt with the question about whether or not masks are safe, because people have complained, and we've talked about this in this podcast as well, that wearing a mask can cut off your oxygen level, or it can cause problems with CO2 or something else. Well, here's his answer.
Masks are completely safe for healthy individuals. This was a personal concern to me. I have 4 children who will be going back to school in the fall. I wanted to make sure that what I was asking them to do was safe, wasn't going to hurt their development. Masks in many laboratory studies have been shown to be safe. Doctors have used them for centuries. And the most convincing evidence comes from these countries that have long used masks, where young people, adults, and the elderly have safely worn masks with no side effects.
Have safely worn masks with no side effects. And I'm just curious, you can share this in the comments if you like. What is the grand conspiracy about masks? What is the evil intention that people have, that they would all come together and they would conspire against you to get you to wear a mask? I mean, just the evidence here is overwhelming. And it's not just from our state. It's not just from BYU. But it's everywhere that you look. When masks are used, the rate of spread goes down and the mortality rate goes down, which means that you wearing a mask will save lives. It's just simple. And if you don't believe that, what is the conspiracy here? Is part of the New World Order that everyone will be wearing a mask? Because you know what? It doesn't help law enforcement. It doesn't help government, because it means they can't tell who you are. because all of their facial recognition software doesn't work when you're wearing a mask. So it doesn't help them monitor you or control you. If they can get you to have some type of contact tracing app on your phone or your device, then maybe that will do it. Is it that they're trying to scare you so that you what? You spend less of your money? That you don't participate in an economy? I just don't understand. I haven't heard an accurate description as to what is the intent of the conspiracy here. So share that with me in the comments. I'll consider anything you've got to offer. I just I gotta see something before I start believing in Sasquatch and black helicopters. But that is me. And now I saved it to the very end. It's a very mean radio trick to tease you with a question and then hold it to the very end. I am guilty of doing that, but we started off the podcast asking the question, will you at some point be required to wear goggles or some type of eye covering as well as a face mask? This comes up because of an interview with Dr. Fauci. Here's the question and the answer.
I think we're going to get to a point where eye protection is recommended.
It might. I mean, if you really want perfect protection of your mucosal surfaces, just for your audience, Jen, as you very well know, you have mucosa in the nose, mucosa in the mouth, but you also have mucosa in the eye. And that's one of the things that, theoretically, you should protect all the mucosal surfaces. So if you have goggles or an eye shield, you should use it. I mean, it's not universally recommended, but if you really want to be complete, you should probably use it if you can. It's just that it's so easy for people to just make a cloth mask.
I sure wish you would have said mucosal about 10 more times. Yeah. No, what he's explaining here is that it might be recommended for your own protection, but that it's not something that will affect the spread of the illness. So if your eyes are uncovered, you're not somehow, there's not stuff coming out of your eyeballs that is causing other people to get infected. I guess unless you cry and your tears get on something, somehow that might happen. But the answer to the question about whether or not you will be forced to wear goggles or face masks to cover your eyes, I believe that answer is no, and that it will stay as no. So we'll answer the question that way. I hope that this podcast has shed some light on some of the important questions that you might have. But to sum it up, there just is no question that wearing a mask protects others and it protects you. It saves lives. It reduces the spread of COVID-19. And the faster that we can reduce the spread of COVID-19, the faster that we can get our economy and get our jobs and get everything else back up and running. So it's not some grand conspiracy to make you look silly wearing a face covering. It's actually designed to save lives, which I'm interested in, and to get everybody back to work, which I am also very, very interested in.